Soldiers speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures. Soldiers speak out.
Thank you, Nina. First off, I'd like to welcome everyone to, if you didn't know about this, a former military base. You're sitting in what was Fort Lawton prior to 1970-71 when grassroots Native activists occupied the site, turned it into Discovery Park and the Daybreak Star Center. I'd like to introduce, I'm honored to introduce our speaker, our keynote speaker this evening, Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern is an activist who writes and lectures about war and the role of the CIA. It was his analysis of the war in Iraq and of the CIA's role in bringing the war about that made him one of the country's most powerful anti-war voices. He holds an MA in Russian Studies from Fordham University, a certificate in Theological Studies from Georgetown University, and is a graduate of Harvard Business School's Advanced Management Program. Ray's intelligence work, beginning in the US Army and continuing at the CIA, spanned 7 presidents, from Kennedy to Bush the First, Daddy Bush. During his career as a CIA analyst on foreign policy, he synthesized and prepared the president's daily brief to senior White House advisors and shared national intelligence estimates. Now retired, Ray is proud of the fact that he reported his findings without fear or favor to the politicians and was supported in his work by his superiors. In 2003, Ray co-founded the steering group of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, or VIPS, which speaks out against what the group sees as corruption in the CIA, which allowed the agency's integrity to bend to the will of White House officials. He asserts that the war in Iraq was manufactured under false pretenses, the real reason being oil. In a 2007 letter to former CIA Director George Tenet, he and other former intelligence officials accused Tenet of dovetailing intelligence to fit with what politicians wanted to hear in the push for war. During both the Bush and Obama years, the White House has eyed an attack on Iran to stop its apparent development of nuclear capabilities, and Ray has raised concerns over why an attack would be necessary. His organization, VIPS, has also recently highlighted the role of the National Security Agency in spying on Americans and people and governments around the world. 1 month ago today, Ray and 3 other former US intelligence officials were in Moscow to present Edward Snowden with an award to honor his role in blowing the whistle on the NSA. The VIPS members, including Ray, had all previously been awarded the same recognition from the Sam Adams Associates for Integrity and Intelligence. From Daniel Ellsberg to Edward Snowden, whistleblowers and retired officials have played a central role in alerting Americans to the crimes committed in our names. Ray has been a proud part of that tradition and an educator of and inspiration for many of the veterans at Coffee Strong, and we welcome him to Seattle tonight.
My wife always, by the way, tells me to warn people when I tell apocryphal stories that they're apocryphal, okay? I think this one really happened, though. You had this incredible community. They knew all the responses, you know, Lord be with you, and also with you. I guess they changed that now, but whatever it was. And forever and ever, that stayed amen, all right? So he gets at the podium, and he has this incredible homily or sermon prepared, and he checks the mic, and it didn't resonate, and he said, oh God, something's wrong with this damn thing. And also with you, was the immediate response from him. It's not going to get any better than that, so you're free to leave whenever. You know, it's sort of de rigueur to say how honored you are to be with other folks, but forget de rigueur here. I'm from the Bronx. I say, you know, ditch de rigueur, okay? Okay, ditch de rigueur. I am really and truly and sincerely and authentically pleased as punch to be with you all, because this is where the action is. This is more than people just talking about it. These are people, you are people implementing what I call the Noah principle. Some of you have heard me talk about it. How many people know what the Noah principle is? Oh, good, good. I'm going to tell you that. All right. No more awards for predicting rain. Rewards only for building arcs. Okay? Now, you all have built a whole bunch of little arcs here. And I'm in wonderment and amazement and pleased as punch to be. I hear my grandma, my Irish grandmother, saying to me in the back here, Raymond, show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. Well, I think she's smiling down at me to this evening, see me in this company. Rita and I, my wife of 52 years, as soon as we heard about you all, we said, this is the real deal, and we became contributors right away. So it's just really neat to be here and to see all the things that have happened in 5 years. My goodness. See, when people get together, things can happen. I want to say a special hello or shout out, I guess they say these days, to all my friends from Seattle and Olympia and Bellingham and Tacoma. Tacoma especially is the Catholic workers there, some of whom are represented here. Father Bix and the others with whom I spent a very interesting weekend in court. And just seeing their witness. Okay, witness is what this is all about, in my view. I also want to introduce a friend of mine that you don't know so well because she hasn't been around all that long. Elizabeth Murray, where are you sitting? Would you stand up just so people can see what shirt you got on there and so forth? Now, Elizabeth was a very senior official at the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Intelligence Council until 3 years ago when she left. Just to give you some feel for her experience, she's fluent in Arabic, and German, and Spanish, I think Persian, maybe 2 or 3 other languages, but she is very much devoted to what you all are doing here, what we all are doing, and I hope that you know, she will be available for you all being as close as Bellingham. I'd love to, you know, fly across the country. This is my second time in 1 month, but she's a lot closer. Welcome, Elizabeth. News item. VA. November 1st, 2013. VA stops releasing data on injured vets as the total reaches a grim milestone. The U.S. has likely reached a grim but historic milestone in the war on terror. The war on terror, give me a break. 1 million veterans injured from the fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, but you haven't heard this reported anywhere else. Why? Because the government is no longer sharing this information with the public. Great government, huh? That's why, when I finally got on CNN for my 1.5 minutes of glory last week, and Aaron Burnett, you know, tried to ask me why I felt so strongly about the Fourth Amendment being shredded, NSA shredding the Fourth Amendment, I recited it for her, and after I was finished, I said, and there is no way, and she said, no, we'll go to our next guest. And I tried again. There's no way. No, we'll go to somebody else. And you know what I want to say, of course, there's no way that what NSA has been doing can be squared with the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. I took a solemn oath. Took a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. How many of you swore the same oath? Didn't have to be as an Army officer, it could have been high official. So, good many of you, okay? Guess what? That oath does not have an expiration date. And even newly sworn folks like Ed Snowden take that oath very seriously. So if you want to know why Ed Snowden did the unusual thing he did, just read what he says. What Ed Snowden was to realize not only was the Constitution and specifically the Fourth Amendment being trashed, but he was part of it, okay? He was living six-figure salary, Honolulu, you know. He had it made. And most people don't have the guts to live up to their oath. He did, and he is to be congratulated, and that's why we're delighted to give him the Sam Adams Award for integrity. Yeah. Now, I should explain my attire here. We intelligence officers, you know, we always try to blend in with the indigenous. And I see some ties here, and I'm sort of, you know, I was misled. I said, you know, just wear something grubby. Not grubby, but sandals, and, you know, I had somebody of my generation say, Ray, I think you have your sweater inside out. I said, no, Dan, this is cool. This is with it, okay. So, all right, now I'm all mic'd up. Now let me continue here. This is Veterans Day weekend, of course, and I just read you these very grim figures. And I was very moved by what Judy had to say and what Maria had to say. And I was totally moved by the number of hands that went up when you all were asked, has anyone been touched by the story of a veteran? Now you have to understand why I was so moved. I talk a lot in some well-heeled suburbs of Washington, D.C., like Bethesda and like Arlington, and when I usually ask KFC or Rotary Club or whatever it is, wherever they let me in, which is diminishing premises these days, but I say it respectfully, I say, now how many of you have a blood relative in Iraq or Afghanistan? Oh, well, nobody. Not one, all right? And I say, well, how many of you know somebody that's there? Maybe 5 or 6 out of 100, you know? Now, if I make a little sermon in Greensboro, North Carolina, one of my favorite Baptist churches there, and I ask those two same questions. The first one, half of the congregation go up. The second one, all but about 10 in the congregation have not really had this experience. So I think this points up the fact that without personal experience with innocent suffering, okay, without that, you really have a hard time understanding or even feeling what the enormity of this demonic stuff is. And I see young vets out there, old vets out there, almost as old as me. They've had that experience. And that's what can move you. That's the catalyst to understanding, discerning what can be done. And then the last step is the toughest one, figuring out what to do. And you guys have figured it out. I congratulate you. I wish you would congratulate all of you here. Turn around and look around. Now, my specialty was Russia, and I know a Russian poem that encapsulates one thing that has been particularly vividly clear to me. I don't have to lean over here anymore, do I? And that is that mothers, particularly, are affected in a terrible way by casualties and particularly by deaths in any war. And so I like to recite this as a kind of indication that it's universally true, okay? This is a poem by Nekrasov, a Russian poet of the 19th century, and it's not long, and he's talking about the horrors of war, okay? The title is Vнимание ужасам войны. Anybody have Russian here? Oh, good. Maybe you can help me translate when we're finished. Внимание ужасам войны, при каждой новой жертве боя мне жаль ни друга, ни жены, мне жаль ни самого героя. Увы, утешится жена, и друга лучший друг забудет. Но где-то есть душа одна, она до гроба помнить будет. При лицемерных наших дел и всякой пошлости и прозе одни я в мире подсмотрел святые искренние слезы, то слезы бедных матерей. Им не забыть своих детей, погибших на кровавой ниве, как не понять плохую шаиве своих поникнувших детей. Paying attention to the horrors of war and every new victim, I feel sorry. I don't feel sorry for the victim's friend, not even for his wife, not even for the hero, they call him, himself. Hopefully, wives and other people, their tears will be assuaged, and best friends forget their best friends. Но где-то есть душа одна, but somewhere there's one soul, okay? Душа одна, она до гроба помнить будет. She will remember until the grave, okay? При лицемерных наших тел и всякой пошлости, I mean, with all the banality of everyday life, одни я в мире подсмотрел святые искренние слезы, святые искренние слезы.
The saints are shedding sincere tears.
The sincere, the sacred, sincere tears бедных матерей, of poor mothers. Им не забыть своих детей.
Им не забыть своих детей.
They don't forget their own children. Погибших на кровавой ниве, who have perished on the bloody battlefield, just as, как не поднять плохую шаиве, just as a weeping willow tree can never lift up its branches, okay? Now, Nekrasov had some experience in this, as one would imagine. Some of you have had that experience. That's why I was so thankful for being invited here. And, you know, if people can't put that experience together and the VA announcement that, well, it's 100 million veterans now injured in these wars, but we're not going to let anybody know about that, you know? If you can listen to that or regard that or think about that without anger, well, there's something wrong with you. Now, where I grew up in the Bronx, anger was frowned upon. It was sort of like maybe a generational thing, but also we were pretty dangerous in the Bronx. You know, there's this apocryphal story about these two Irishmen ducking it out in an alley, you know, and another one comes along, an Irishman, and he sees what they're doing. He says, he watches them for 2 minutes, and he says, "Excuse me, sirs, is this a private quarrel, or will you let me in?" So, you know, they had to be careful with us Irish. You know, it was frowned upon to be angry for more than a day. You know, after a day, you should get over it, right? Get over it. Well, Irish, they give us a week, you know, but it was still frowned upon. And what I learned, one of the few things that I remember learning in philosophy at Fordham College, is that Thomas Aquinas, of whom we had to study far too much. I mean, you know, I still have the Summa Theologica by my bedside because I'm not finished with it. Now, I remember when I was getting really angry when I saw what happened in Iraq, you know, I'm remembering Nekrasov and a meeting, Cindy Sheehan, you know, it's all coming together. And I said, oh, wait a second. Aquinas said that anger is getting a bum rap. A bum rap? He complained bitterly. He's writing about virtue, okay? He was really good about virtue. He wasn't so good about things he didn't know about, like women or things like that, okay? But about virtue, it was pretty good. And he said, there's no word in the language in which I write, Latin, there's no word for the virtue of anger. Virtue of anger, okay? Oh, does that sound right to you? Virtue? Did you guys know that we can be virtuous when we're really angry? Well, I was really delighted to remember that. You see, he brought that old Pythagorean idea where virtue's in the middle, okay? So too much of it, they had a word, iracundia in Latin, which meant always being ticked off, okay? And there was timidity, another word for that, but there was no, he said, the word for the virtue of anger, manat innominata, remains unnamed, okay? And so we reached back to the 4th century church, John Chrysostom, who said, he or she who is not angry when there is just cause for anger sins. Why? Because anger respice bonum justitiae. Anger looks to the good of justice. And if you can live amid injustice without anger, you are unjust. And now Thomas had he had a kind of a custom to tacking on his own little corollary to the fathers of the church. You go one better than them. And he railed against what he called unreasoned patience. Okay? You getting it now? Now, that's the best we can do with the translation from the Latin. Unreasoned patience. You know what he said about it? He said, unreasoned patience sows the seeds of vice, nourishes negligence, and encourages not only bad people, but good people to do evil. Think about Germany in the 30s. Think about so many of us here in this country who are kind of willing to just not hear, not observe what's going on. So, please be aware that we can be very virtuous even though we're angry. It all depends on how we channel that anger, I guess. That's what they used to tell us Irish in the Bronx, anyway. It's easier to be angry at others, of course. I like one of my favorite prophets is Abraham Heschel, the rabbi who was so prominent half a century ago. What he said was, when he was decrying the agony of the plundered poor. And what he said was, remember, wherever injustice takes place, it's not enough to just be angry. Few of us are guilty, but all of us are responsible. Okay? Wow. And I see some nods out there because I know I'm preaching to the choir, okay? But you need to tell your friends, all of us are responsible. So, what kind of arcs do we build? No more awards for predicting rain. We all know about the rain, folks. What are we doing? Well, some of us, I think, are called to do what Dr. King called spreading truth around. That Birmingham City Jail letter, that's a masterpiece of American literature. I know of nothing better. And I've memorized parts of it, but there's one part that seems really to resonate to me. And it has to do with this. He compares exposing evil, exposing injustice to lancing a boil. Now, at one gathering in Washington about a year ago, I started to explain what boils are like. And when I was a teenager, I had and Medea Benjamin said, "Ray, enough sharing about the boils. That's enough sharing. We don't need any more sharing about the boils." Okay. Okay. So those of you who know what boils are like, what Martin Luther King Jr. said was, he talked about it not being possible to get at the truth unless the untruth is exposed with all its pus-flowing ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. So too, injustice must be exposed with all the friction that its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. That's what we're about. That's what we need to tell our friends about. That's why we need to find ways to tell what's really going on, to tell about this unconscionable activity by the VA, suppressing the statistics. Now, the task is enormous, and it's not easy. And our press, well, I like to say this. Those of you who have heard me speak before know that I say this every time. But it's really important, folks, and that is that 50 years in Washington, you see a lot of change. But there's one change that dwarfs all the other changes in significance, and that is that we no longer have a free media. That's big, folks. Big. The fourth estate is dead. But what's the good news? What's the good news? There's a fifth estate, okay? Yeah, where is it? You guys in Seattle probably understand it, but I know it's in the ether somewhere. It comes down into my computer, and I can find out what's going on, okay? And what you younger people need to do is make it so easy for us, my generation, to just hit 2 keys and get all we need, okay? No, you can do it. You can do it. It would be a major service. I mean, that's what my grandchildren do for me. Now, just to give you an example of what we're up against, I had a 4-minute mini debate with Secretary Rumsfeld back in 2006. And as I left that, I challenged him on some of the lies he had told about Iraq, and he told some more, or repeated those. And they could be seen as lies because, it was on the record. And it was early enough in the day, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so the press couldn't avoid it because nothing else in the whole world happened that day. What luck, huh? So I was on most of the evening things, but as I'm walking out of the, this was a very male, defense-friendly, old, did I say well-heeled? It was a very special kind of think tank in Atlanta, okay? And I wangled an invitation only because the gutsy women of World Can't Wait knew how to do that for me, okay? We'll give a hand for them. The gutsy women of World Can't Wait, okay? So anyhow, I challenged him. You can see it. Actually, some of it's still getting some hits on YouTube, if you can believe it. So I'm walking out, and when you do something like this, you hope for, somebody to come up and look at their husband or wife, and when they're not looking, say, where'd it go? None of that, not one, okay? So I figured I'd have some fun. I turned around, and everybody looked at the ground and looked at the, it was really pretty depressing. I got a call on my phone. Hello, Mr. McGovern, Anderson Cooper here. You're causing quite a stir down here in Atlanta. I'd like to have you on my program tonight, but I need to ask you a question first. Weren't you afraid? Now, I was half in shock after what had happened, and my first reaction, well, that's a sensible question, and so I started. I said, well, no, actually, I used to brief secretaries of defense, and I said, wait a second, this is Anderson Cooper, heir to the Vanderbilt fortune? Do I have that right? Vanderbilt? I think it is, yeah. And, he's not going to be out in the street begging or anything. He's done so then I said, maybe I had a little fun. I said, Anderson, actually, to be honest with you, it was a real high, No, really, I had done my homework. I was actually preparing my own speech for that night. I was getting an award from the Civil Liberties Union. That's why I was doing it in Atlanta. And some of this just dovetailed with what he was saying, and he was lying again. So yeah, Anderson, just take my advice. Do your homework, ask some real questions. You'll find it's a real high. And he says, oh, yes, well, I'll have my people call your people. I said, I don't have any people. Just give me a call back. And he did let me on his program, okay? Now, that's one example. Now, last week I was on CNN. That cut me down to a minute and a half. And I guess, did I tell you this? I recited the Fourth Amendment. Yeah, and I was cut off there. So, CNN is, and who's the big spokesman for the NSA thing on CNN? He's got a bald head, and he's a very distinguished looking former official, former head of the NSA and former head of the and CIA, his name is Michael Hayden, okay. He's the go-to guy. He's the guy, yeah, he's a go-to guy, all right? He's the go-to guy that Vice President Cheney okay? Go-to, not after 9/11, mind you, before 9/11. February 2001, said we're going to tap into AT&T's network there in Folsom Street in San Francisco. We're going to do all this kind of stuff. That stuff that you have up there in NSA about, you know, the first commandment, thou shalt not eavesdrop on American citizens without a warning, forget about it. Forget about it. Before 9/11, okay? So he's the spokesman now for what's going on in NSA on CNN. It doesn't get much worse than that. So what do we do? Well, I think we need to have some prophets to look up to. I mean, you know, prophets come in very different sizes and shapes, and some of them do eccentric things. Maybe some of you are thinking, well, that sounds like me a little bit, but you could just be a kook, you know. Eccentric means out of ex-centron, Greek, out of the center, okay? So here's Isaiah. Now, how many of you know that the prophet Isaiah went around for 2 years stark naked? He did. Yeah, it's in the Bible, all right? All right, now exegetes, you know, the formal professors and all, looking into this, without any humor, say, well, it's not clear that he was always naked, just during liturgical services. Well, that doesn't let the man off the hook, does it? No. So what was he saying? What was he saying? I think he was saying, look, I'm stripped of my garments. And you are saying, oh, what a terrible thing that is. You are stripped of the vision with which Yahweh blessed you, a vision of peace, a vision of justice and shalom. And that is much more reprehensible. That's, I think, what Isaiah was saying. And how about people like Rachel Corrie? You know, what was she saying? I'm standing on this hill in front of this house because I feel strongly about justice for Palestinians as well as for anybody else. You know what happened to Rachel? I feel very, very close to her because her dad gave me this little bracelet, which has her name and her date of birth and her date of death. Why do I wear it? Well, because when I'm in a difficult situation, I look down and say, you know, if 23-year-old Rachel Corrie can stand up before an Israeli bulldozer, I can at least do X, Y, or Z. And that suggests you need witnesses, you need prophets like that, not to be put up on a pedestal, but to realize that they're real people like you and me. And finally, I just suggest that in my 12 years of being an activist, you know, where I used to work, activist was not regarded as a complimentary thing. But you know what? I really, really honor that now. I really welcome it. Why? Because I had to leave the Bronx to go down to Washington, and I've lived in Virginia for 50 years now, and I live very, very close to where George Mason lived. You know, he and James Madison did the Constitution, did the Bill of Rights and all that stuff. And those fellas, you know, when they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to this enterprise that we're all still in, if just barely, it was just as likely as not that they would end up on the end of a rope, right? More likely, probably. And they did it anyway. So it's really up to us to honor that tradition and to figure out how to do it. So, what can we do? Well, some of us are probably thinking, or our neighbors, you know, I'm one person, I'm not a Rachel Corrie, I'm not an Isaiah, you know, I'm not even Dr. Martin Luther King. What can I do? Well, I think this is what I've noticed over the last 12 years, that Americans typically are afraid of embarking on any course of action unless there's a reasonable prospect of success, okay? Now, who likes to be laughed at? Who wants to say, McGovern, who wants to hear? McGovern, what did you think you were doing when you stood up and turned your back on Hillary Clinton? Yeah, well, what was that going to achieve? I mean, give me a break, you know? Well, I know one thing it achieved. When my Veterans for Peace colleagues let it be known that a 71-year-old man was brutalized in her hearing without her missing a syllable. Hillary Clinton received all manner of telegrams and emails, like 100,000, would you believe, the first day, okay? And then when my veteran peace colleague said, and besides, he's got cancer, and I did then, I had lymphoma, I was under treatment, man, another 100,000, 200,000. So just a little notice to those of you who have the same color hair I do, okay? You have a big advantage. Americans care about us old people getting beat up. No, they really do. I mean, look at Vicks. Look at how many examples, okay? So this is not just said frivolously, all right? Young people, I get beat up, I have to come and tell them, young people like that. But old people, if you're willing to stick your neck out just a little bit, they're not going to kill you, I don't think, not yet. And they're not going to break any bones. All I did was have multiple lacerations and stuff. So don't wait for the prospect of success to be, I'm not saying that was a big success, by the way. I'm just saying that it's not about being successful, it's about being what? Faithful, right. So I'm going to finish with a little quotation from my friend, I guess I could call him. I took a couple of courses from him. His name is Dan Berrigan. He's 92 now. He's not real well, but my goodness, what a witness, what a prophet he has been to me. And he's talking about their experience 45 years ago now, when they created this napalm, and they got the draft board, what do you call it? File in Catonsville, Maryland, and they put it in a big thing, and they burned them. And then they prayed, and they waited to be arrested. Well, so he's talking about later, after that happened, and they're sitting in the only federal building in Catonsville, Maryland, which happens to be the post office. Okay. So they're sitting around there, and Dan is saying, there was a great relief for having done what we were called to do. And the way he explained it was this. He said, I came upon a precious insight. It was something like this. If you presuppose integrity and discipline, then one is justified in entering upon a large risk. Not indeed because the outcome is assured, but because the integrity and the value of the act have spoken aloud. Success or efficiency are placed where they belong, in the background. They're not irrelevant, but they are far from central. I was in need of such reflections as we faced the public after our crime. All sides agreed we were either fools or renegades or just plain crazy. So this is 1968, not even halfway through the war. Okay? Now, Dan also has this incredible sense of humor. And the way he's a poet as well. So the next thing he did was describe what you all are probably familiar with, jut-jawed paradigms. Just then, a jut-jawed paradigm of an FBI agent came into the room. And he looked at the rest of us and he said, my God! He looked at my brother Phil, says Dan. And he said, you again! I'm going to change my religion. And Dan says, no higher compliment could ever be given to my brother Phil. The sense of humor is really important. What I try to remember is that God has this incredible sense of humor. We're really lucky about that, and we're his or her entertainment. One last thought about flinching away from doing what we can. Most people say, well, Rosa Parks, she all of a sudden got really upset, and she said, oh, I'm going to have to do something about this. That's not the case, is it? No. Where did she train? At the Highlander place, right. People don't know that. People need to know that. I know something because Parker Palmer told me this when he came to the Church of the Savior Servant Leadership School to do a fundraiser. And he said, Eleanor Roosevelt went to the principal or the president of the Highlander School after Rosa Parks had done that, and as she said, did you warn Rosa Parks that she'd be called a communist or terrorist or any manner of pejorative names? Did you warn her before she did that? And the headmaster said, well, no. Well, why did you not? Well, she was the last person we thought would ever do this. She was taking it all in, but there was no suggestion that Rosa Parks needed to be warned about this because it was a big surprise to all of us that she did that. So be prepared to be a big surprise to everybody, all of us, and tell your friends, okay? Now I want to finish on a different kind of note, drawing from my Irish tradition. Let's sort of give a little balance here because I think we need to have a light touch. I'd like to recite a poem from William Butler Yeats. It's called The Fiddler of Dooney. It's not very long. When I play my fiddle in Dooney, folk dance like a wave of the sea. My brother is priest in Kilvarnet, my cousin in Bachnabawi. I passed my brother and cousin. They read from their book of prayer. I read from my book of songs that I bought at the Sligo Fair. When we reached the end of time, with Peter sitting in state, he'll call the 3 old souls, but he'll ask me first through the gate. For the good are always the merry, saved by an evil chance, and the merry love the fiddle, and the merry love to dance. So when the folks all see me there, they'll all rush up to me and they'll say, there's the fiddler of Dooney, and they'll dance like a wave of the sea. So I ask you courage in the tradition of Erin Watada, Rachel Corrie, Dr. King, and all the others that we respect and admire so much. And I ask you a sense of joy in the spirit of the Fiddler of Dooney. Thank you very much.
Soldiers, speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers, speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their future.